Teresa Shields Parker. She is our guest today, and she has lost a lot of weight, that is. She's here to share about her 250-pound weight loss and keys to a healthy lifestyle. Teresa, welcome to Real Life.
Thank you.
Yay.
We're so glad you're here. Oh, you have such an amazing story.
I know. Well, Amanda and I were just talking about, we want you to start off and just share with us, introduce yourself to our family. Tell us a little bit about where you're from and how it all began for you.
Well, I'm from Columbia, Missouri, and I've been a journalist all my life. I also do foster care and for mentally challenged individuals. But basically, I grew up in a Christian home. My dad was a pastor, good Christian girl, did everything right, followed all of the no's, don't drink, don't smoke, don't do anything. Except, food was not an issue. Food wasn't on that list. Food was okay, that's what you could use for comfort, for protection, for anything. And so that's kind of how things built in my life.
So it started, the weight gain started as a child?
When I look back at my pictures of me as a child, I don't look overweight, but I always felt overweight. And I was always like a size bigger than the other kids in my classroom. Maybe I was in first grade, I looked like a second or third grader. And, I was always outgrowing my clothes, and that message just kept replaying in my head that, there was something wrong. So
I noticed one thing in reading your book, Sweet Grace, which is a wonderful read and very life-changing, that, you seem to look at situations that happened in your life, and so for our viewers out there, the addiction to no matter what it is, can you talk about some of the life experiences you went through that promoted you into the addiction?
I think there are a lot of different things, and a lot of times we blame an addiction on something that we've gone through. I think it promotes it, it feeds into it, but it's how we perceive it and how we react to it. So one thing that happened when I was 11, I was molested by a family friend. It happened in my grandmother's house, and that was something that was really scary to me because this was a loved person that everybody admired, and I didn't feel like as a kid that I could tell anybody that it happened, so I never told anyone until I was an adult. And that sets up this thing of you've got to self-protect. You're a kid, but you've got to do something to self-protect you. And food was kind of a comfort in that. It was, I would go to that to not feel the emotional issue that underlays all of that. And then built into that too, some issues as I was growing up as far as my mother had an emotional illness. So, I would go to food for comfort because my grandmother was a great cook, And, when you went to grandma's house, you could have all the food you wanted, and she loved and comforted with food. And so then that set up this thing in my head that, whenever I need something, I go to food for it. Instead of going to God, even though I was saved when I was 7, grew up in a Christian home, but there's something tangible about food. I think that's true of any addiction, something tangible there that people go to because God doesn't seem as real.
Okay. Well, I know you talked too about sugar addiction, and that's something that I know a lot of us can relate to. And what happened that prompted you to say it was an addiction and had to make some changes? What was some things that made you change that way?
Change is a process, right? And the things you go through lead to that. But back in 1977, I was starting to gain a lot of weight, and I cried out to God and I said, how can I move this mountain of flesh? And he gave me a plan. Stop eating sugar, eat more meats, fruits, and vegetables, and stop eating so much bread. I thought, nice plan, God, how do you do that? And so for the next 30 years, I was so my second tagline on the book is the first tagline is how I lost 250 pounds and stopped trying to earn God's favor. Well, that was part of the issue, trying. So I would try these diets, because in my mind, you go on a diet, right?
Right.
And then when I would get done with the diet, I would reward myself with sugar, of course, I would think, okay, I'll lose 100 pounds, and then I can eat Mama's oat milk cake.
Yeah.
That'll be my reward. And then that would just set me back off on the track of gaining the weight back. And so I went through a whole lot of issues, a whole lot of diets, a whole lot of things. And when I found myself regaining the weight after having lost quite a bit of weight, I started regaining the weight, and I thought, I am in big trouble here. I have not fixed my brain. I actually had gastric bypass surgery.
Wow.
And lost weight, and then started gaining it back because I started eating the sugar again as soon as I could. And that's what really prompted me and said, you are in big trouble. And I was at a group where a man was giving his testimony about being a 25-year sober alcoholic. And in that testimony, he said, alcohol is one molecule away from sugar. Alcohol is liquid sugar. And that was the turning point for me, because even though I had not read about sugar addiction, this was like back in before we hear a lot now about sugar addiction, but I had not read about that at all, not researched it. But I thought an alcoholic gets free from alcohol by stopping drinking alcohol. If I am a sugar addict, I can get free of sugar by stopping eating sugar.
Wow.
And then I realized that's what God told me 30 years ago.
Oh my.
He knew my weakness. 2 Corinthians 12:9 says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. He knew that. Until I admitted my weakness, until I laid it on the altar, his power could not come in and activate me.
So powerful.
Well, and you have a book that's called Sweet Grace, and it's about your weight loss journey and what you have. We talked about that not only has it been a weight loss, but it's also been a transformation.
Just let's talk for just a minute about this transformation process. It wasn't quick. I want to make sure that people understand this isn't a make a decision, see an immediate response.
No, and we didn't get this way overnight, and it's going to take a long time to go forward, but the deal is not a diet, a lifestyle change. We're not focusing on weight loss, we're focusing on what got us here in the first place.
That's right. Why does it matter?
Why does that matter?
Why does it matter what we do with our bodies? Because a lot of us think, well, we're going to go to heaven, and when we go to heaven, it's all going to be good. So we just have to suffer through this life.
Yeah, I think it matters because we can't do the work we're called to do if we're tired, if we're fatigued, if our brain is really messed up with sugar, we don't have the clarity we need. We can't do the work God has called us to do, and the enemy keeps us in bondage.
I think that's very important. Would you repeat what you just said?
Yes, the enemy keeps us in bondage.
Wow.
Because
And it's the sanctified sin. It's the
sanctified sin. I've never heard that.
I guess it is, because it's just so accepted, and and we have convoluted also because it's okay to eat a lot of processed foods and chemicals and things that are not really good for us either.
We disguise it as fellowship.
Yeah.
But we can have fellowship. We're having good fellowship right now. We can have fellowship over healthy food, over fruit, over vegetables. We can do that, and that's better for us.
Right.
But if it doesn't taste the way we want it to taste, it doesn't feel like we're doing the right. Because when you have an addiction, if you have a sugar addiction, then you have to, pardon the pun, you have to feed the addiction.
That's right. And you know what? The food manufacturers know that, and that's why they put the extra sugar in there, so that you think it tastes good. But when you eliminate sugar from your diet, all of a sudden you start tasting things that you think, wow, that tastes really good. Broccoli tastes good. A strawberry tastes good without a lot of stuff on it.
Absolutely.
One thing I really learned, from your book was really how forgiveness, when you begin to forgive,
Yes.
It's like God really began to do a work in you that you desired to do better for your life. You
Yes.
know, so it's so important, that work of forgiveness, and it's supernatural what God does on the inside of us when we release those hurts.
Yes.
And you know, I know our viewers, you may have hurt. We encourage you to call our prayer line. We want to agree with you. We want you to be set free. We don't want you to allow these things, you know, that may have happened throughout your life to continue to keep you in bondage. So please give us a call, 888-665-4483. We'd love to agree with you in prayer.
Well, you also mentioned too about you have to totally surrender to God and allow God to do the transformation. But it's a discipline on our parts. It's not like we just sort of lay down and say, okay, God, you know, you've had to make some changes not only in your eating, but didn't you have to read your Bible? Weren't there some
Yes.
practical things that you had to do?
Yeah, and you know, it's a stop-start. You stop certain things and you start other things. And you replace your bad habits with good habits.
Okay.
And God will give you a plan for that, you know, how to stop something, how to put it in something else in its place. It might be reading your Bible every day. It might be praying. It might be listening to good Christian worship music instead of all of the other stuff you're listening to really feed your soul as well as your spirit and your body the correct things.
See, that's really an easy way to go about it. Not being mixed up with all these different diets, but just do what you just said, a stop-start method. You know,
Yes.
just to say, we're going to stop, and now we're going to go ahead and start with something that we know that God would call it worthy to do.
And that's something that you do for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
It's not a one-time thing. It's a series of start-stops. We get those in our life and we continue it.
And that's good. That's a really good practical approach. I like to call it baby steps.
Yeah.
Take baby steps in the right direction. You don't have to start a sprint, but start a baby step in the right direction, and then watch your body detox, because sugar as a poison accumulates in our bodies, and then as we quit feeding the body, it starts to detoxify, and your body cleans itself out. The body's a miracle. It's
Yes.
miraculously made. So we're so thankful that you came and shared with us.
Thank
Thank-
you. And you know, she's not, I understand you have lost 260 pounds and
Yes.
counting.
Yes.
You're still playing. It's amazing.